For Global Business Update, Michael Wosin joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael, from Cape Town. I recall that you are in Cape Town, yes, not from London.
Good morning, yes, indeed. Asia stocks are relatively flat. I mean, no great surprise there, waiting for the US inflation figures later on, and then wondering how it will influence the US Fed, the Central Bank of the United States, on their interest rate decision later in the week. China marginally down, about 0.1%. I think one of the most significant things from that particular area is Australian business confidence, which has actually been falling for the first time, in 12 months. However, it has to be said that China is axing its travel app. That's the latest easing in its very, very slight relaxation of the zero COVID rules. What this means is that domestic people traveling within China will not have to fill in a form saying whether or not they've been in contact with COVID-19. And this is the government really also reacting to some of the biggest public disorder events that have happened since Xi came into power in 2012. Meanwhile, China has given the WTO a big job. It's filed a suit against the United States on the sweeping US export contract. The US export controls on chips from the United States. That's going to be quite a lot of work for the WTO. As far as the United States is concerned, it's continuing with that narrative really about the key inflation figures for November, which are coming out later today, and that will therefore be seen to influence the way in which the Fed acts. It's absolute banking certainty there will be an interest rate rise in the United States. Once again, it's a question of how much, whether it be 75 basis points or 50 basis points, i.e. 0.5%. Even though the markets will be looking at this, I'm sure that they will be taking into account the general mood from the chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell, who said not that many days ago that even though the pace of interest rate rises may be slowing very, very slightly, of course, it didn't make any promises about that, but they still will maintain a very, very tough view on inflation, and borrowing costs will remain relatively high. The Dow up 528 on that. Oracle was quite strong yesterday, but again, this could just be a bubble, and the market could change direction fairly rapidly, as it tends to do in these very volatile times. So I think that whatever happens tomorrow, the general message will be interest rates will be staying high for some time. The ex-CEO of the failed FTX company, Sam Bankman-Fried, has been arrested in the Bahamas. Now, the thought here is that there must be quite a strong case against him, number one, which I'm sure there is. Number two, that there is a strong case for extradition from the Bahamas to the United States. He faces charges from various authorities in the United States, and they include conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, wire fraud, and also money laundering. And he could be facing a very, very long prison sentence as a result of that. So he arrested in the Bahamas, and it's felt that there is a strong case for extradition to the United States. Elon Musk is no longer the world's richest human being. That mantle has passed on to the CEO, Bernardino, of LVMH, the luxury goods maker, which includes Louis Vuitton, Tiffany, Tag Heuer, and Celine amongst its big labels. Remember, he's in the middle of this, or having purchased $44 billion. Twitter, a decline in Tesla shares as well. And also Twitter itself debating about digital safety. Now, there was a self-appointed committee within Twitter which was trying to make sure that people who used it were, as it were, kept safe from any kind of naughty or nasty comments from other people. The Trust and Safety Council of Twitter has been disbanded. 3 senior members have left. It still is being debated as to whether and how that kind of safety rule, as far as the use of Twitter is concerned, is going to be applied to it. Let's move to the EU, and the Qatar corruption scandal is beginning to rock the organisation. Ursula von der Leyen has said that she feels there is the utmost concern about this. There have been 4 arrests in Belgium, 20 premises have been searched. There's also the stripping of her power of the MEP Greek one, Eva Kaili, and this is all about really Qatar apparently seeking to buy influence within the EU chamber. Again, the leader of the ECB and the EU both expressing deep concern about the way in which this has happened, and also the fact that it probably erodes the ECB and the EU's authority. Let's turn our attention to the UK, and given that we apparently are on some sort of cusp of Big Bang 2 in the United Kingdom, Microsoft has bought a 4% stake in the London Stock Exchange, part of a 10-year cloud deal they're pursuing with the London Stock Exchange, and they've also appointed Scott Guthrie, who is one of the executive VPs in charge of cloud and AI in Microsoft, as a non-executive director of the London Stock Exchange. So they've got some control there. It's very, very complicated, but it will give the London Stock Exchange a new data infrastructure and also power from the cloud and from Microsoft in terms of its analytics of data. Staying with the UK, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt, has warned that the UK economy will get worse before it gets better, noted a 0.3% contraction within the last 3 months. There were slightly brighter figures in October, but there's nothing to do with the general trend, which tends to be veering Britain towards a recession, albeit a relatively shallow one. The bank will almost undoubtedly raise interest rates when it announces its decision on Thursday to 3.5%. That's half a percentage point, maybe even more. And of course, Britain is facing more strikes and so on, and overpay well into the new year. So basically, things not looking very bright at all for the UK economy. As far as oil's concerned, sort of range now, it is relatively volatile. I'd point you to a range of between $70 and $80 a barrel. It's rising. It's been rising on what's felt to be more China demand, and also knowing that Russia and OPEC Plus will keep supply quite tight. So that's what they're forecasting at the moment. Oil price of between $70 and $80 a barrel. That's the global view this morning.
Real quickly, I don't know how the American justice system grinds very slowly. I don't know why Friedman Tan was not arrested all this while, why I had to take them to arrest him in the Bahamas, but I'm happy that he's finally arrested, because what that man did damaged a lot of people. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the UK economy. Is Jeremy Hunt being honest when he says things are going to get worse before they get better? Because it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon on the horizon. The numbers are stacked against the UK, and these austerity measures put in place by Rishi Sunak, I think, is now becoming overbearing on the citizens in the UK.
I think you're right. I think the UK economy, the time frame of the recession, I think, is still in doubt. Anything can happen over the coming months. It could be that maybe these strikes will continue, or maybe these strikes will be phased out. There will be more negotiation, particularly about the public services as well. It's very, very difficult to tell right now where we're speaking at the moment. I think what Jeremy Hunt is doing is taking the political point of view. You might as well give them the bad news, because anything better than that will be seen as good news later on. I mean, who can predict what's going to happen? It is the only thing we can sort of see at the moment is that the recession is going to be with us. It'll be relatively shallow, they hope. Interest rates will remain high for some time, and really it'll be down to the agility of the entrepreneurial part of the UK economy to actually make its presence felt. I mean, these are very, very big question marks, and they are, as they are about all economies, all developed economies around the world. And I haven't even begun to talk about the Ukraine war and the lack of global demand again, which is something which needs to be built into the equation. As far as Sam Bankman-Fried's concerned, yes, arrested in the Bahamas, and as I said to you, the feeling is that the reason he's been arrested there is that the US authorities must be feeling that they have very, very strong grounds for extradition to bring him back to the United States to face those charges that I mentioned.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the corruption rocking the EU, with former Vice President of the EU, Eva Kaili, being implicated alongside some members of her family. Now, this corruption scandal has exposed a number of gaps in the transparency and integrity of the EU itself, particularly with its relationship with Qatar, and evidence pointing to the fact that there were some inducements to give Qatar leeway in terms of the free access in the Schengen area of the EU. Do you think, in terms of with this outcome, reforms in the EU and some of the areas that ought to certainly be tightened up in the EU?
I think the EU faces an extreme crisis. I mean, if you have a country like Qatar, which is allegedly, and let's be clear about this, all these allegations, and the detail of this is dripping out day by day. But I think you're right. I think the EU has an enormous amount of work to do to restore its credibility after this, if indeed these allegations are proved correct. What will that mean for reform? What will that mean? I mean, the EU is still 10 years after its foundation. It's still an experiment, and it's still very much feeling its growing pains at the moment. And we don't know the eventual size of the EU even. There may be more countries would like to join it because they would like to take advantage of a strong single currency. What they don't like is the fact that they all have different kinds of economies, and there never has been any kind of solution which is sort of one size fits all solution for all those particular countries joining it. So I think this is very serious, but I would caution that the details still have to be ironed out, and this still has to go to a court of law. But I think you're absolutely right. I think the credibility issue is something that the EU needs to grasp hold of fairly quickly, and show at least that it is showing transparency in its investigations of these allegations.
Well, two quick things, Michael. Bankman-Fried was supposed to give a testimony before the House, the U.S. House of Representatives today. But before then, he's been arrested, which is fine. Bahamas, seems to have, the same mind on the matter with the United States. But the major issue, it seems to me, is that extradition may take years, months. It may take a long while before Bankman-Fried, goes to respond to the indictment by the Southern District of New York, which is where he has been indicted. However, you always said, cryptocurrency will go up and down. There's a man they are looking for in Serbia. Interpol is looking for Do Kwon, who is also said to have made away with over 40 billion. But he's still out there, like Bankman-Fried man, who only over the weekend was telling the BBC that he wants to start a new business so that he will be able to pay people back. But maybe that won't happen. But my question in that regard is that, yes, we often talk about the volatility of cryptocurrency, but Nobel laureate Ben Bernanke, former Federal Reserve chairman, says, in fact, with regulation or no regulation, that cryptocurrency is a no-go area and that it is destined to fail. Previously on this program, you tend to give it a little chance. You say it's volatile, but Bernanke says, no, it's destined to fail. My second issue has to do with Big Bang 2.0. All that talk by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in the UK about post-Brexit freedom and how the plan is to make London the financial capital of Europe, free the banks and all of that. Well, you have always said, London will always be the financial capital of Europe. But the same reforms are being implemented in the EU. So what is the guarantee that this new approach with regard to the financial system in London will yield anything significant?
What I would say is no such thing as guarantees. They just don't exist. What you have to do is place the odds against regulation actually working, against the fact, and we were talking about this yesterday on the programme, weren't we? My continuing worry about all these things is that this is now a generation away. And there are people now working at desks in the City of London, as there are in financial centres all the way around the world, who will have no conception of the earthquake that the 2008 financial crisis was. And part of that happened because retail banking got its fingers enmeshed within the slightly riskier side of investment banking. And that's what... That was all tightened up. There was a Glass-Steagall Act in the United States, which you'll know well. And now what Jeremy Hunt is proposing is that those kind of regulations should be relaxed to engender Big Bang 2. I mean, you can talk about openness, you can talk about competitiveness, you can talk about transparency, and all those kind of things that Jeremy Hunt no doubt thinks are a good idea. And my worry, as I expressed it yesterday, and I still maintain this, and I have all the time, is that I don't necessarily think there are people with the right kind of experience in the city and the right kind of memories that will remember what it was like in those in the so-called non-regulated days, when investment banking mixed with retail banking, and there was felt to be no risk. Of course there's risk, so there are no guarantees. As far as London itself is concerned, it still has going for it. It still has respect of regulators, whichever way they go. It still has respect of a currency, however low that may go. And it still has the respect of the legal profession throughout the world. And I think those are the kind of things that will keep London up there amongst the leaders. I don't think it really matters whether we're talking about first, second, or third. Paris seemed to take a bit of a lead over dealing in equities a few months ago. Sure, it did. But if you dissect the figures, you find out that, going forward, London is stronger. Who cares? So long as the financial sector within the United Kingdom keeps paying its taxes towards the common folk, because it happens to be a very, very profitable sector. And that's what the UK needs at the moment. As far as microcurrencies are concerned, or rather cryptocurrencies are concerned, yes. I mean, my view about it is that eventually, when they are regulated, and it is like the Wild West at the moment, and it's not something that I would myself get involved with, but I couldn't possibly advise on whether people should or they shouldn't, because they can gamble in every which way they like. And I think the blockchain payment system will come in, but it will come in a way that we won't even have to think about it. Once it's done that, then I think that cryptocurrencies will have found a firm place within the financial infrastructure. At the moment, they're a bit like the Wild West. Should you wish to gamble, carry on. You can go to the races if you wish.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Thank you very much indeed. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good
morning
to all our viewers. So I mean, of course, great reporting from Nkechi over in Washington, D.C. $55 billion has been pledged from the United States over to Africa over the next 3 years. That's Jake Sullivan, White House National Security Advisor, saying working closely with Congress, the U.S. will commit $55 billion to Africa over the course of the next 3 years across a wide range of sectors to tackle core challenges. Core challenges of our time. I was really struck by Eric Adams, the mayor of New York. His
Chocolate.
Yeah, all that chocolate. We have to play that again, please. I think we have it. We just extracted that from her report, because there's something to be said about that.
But it's African power. But if you don't connect the dots, you are not going to understand the full purpose of this moment. The mayor of the most important city in the most important country is an African. The most important cities in America are headed by Africans. In New York City, the top law enforcement executive, Letitia James, is an African. The head of the assembly is an African. The head of the Senate is an African. The head of the city council is an African. The public advocate is an African. The district attorney in the Bronx is an African. The district attorney in Manhattan is an African. All of this chocolate, what are we going to do with it?
So look, what are we going to do with it, right? We need deals. That is the be-all and the end-all. We need Walmart to say they're going to open a store in Enugu. We need, where is lithium? Kogi? Where do we have lithium? I think it's in the Middle Belt somewhere. We need Tesla to go and explore lithium deposits, whether it's somewhere in the Middle Belt, whether it's Kogi or wherever, and make that announcement. President Buhari, and I think the Bauchi State governor and one other governor from one other state is part of his entourage. We need actual concrete multi-million-dollar deals to be announced at this summit to be brought back to Nigeria. This 55 billion that has been announced, there are 54 countries on the African continent, so that's a little over $1 billion each if you want to share it out over the next 3 years. So that is this economic chocolate and that Mr. Adams is talking about. The fact that you've got all these Africans in these different positions in New York City and so on and so forth. There must be something concrete that comes out of this summit. They're meeting today, they're meeting tomorrow, they're meeting Wednesday. Once again, Xi Jinping, within 2 days of being in Saudi Arabia, the Chinese and the Saudis that the Americans are so scared of because of their relationship with Africa, signed $30 billion worth of deals within 2 days. So that's what, let's us be focused on what it is that we want to get out of this. Everybody that's going to visit, from Ramaphosa to Nana Akufo-Addo to President Buhari, Nana Akufo-Addo should be coming back and announcing that the IMF has concluded the $3 billion that Ghana needs for their fiscal structure. So let's just get to the nitty-gritty. Oil and gas, MOMAN, major oil marketers of Nigeria, they had a workshop yesterday where they called for the end of the monopoly of oil imports. They basically said that they want, the marketers want licenses to be able to bring fuel into the country. What is the ramification of this? If you are to give out licenses to different oil marketers to be able to import fuel, the issue then becomes the cost at which they bring that fuel into the country, because as we all know, seeing that the state is able to import this fuel, the state is able to bring it in at what it says is the official exchange rate of 430, 435. If the major oil marketers of Nigeria then get their own individual licenses, and in fact, they're calling for deregulation. That's basically what they're calling for, because then they would have to peg the cost at which they sell fuel to the cost at which they brought it in. And if they're not going to be getting it with access to, although they're asking, at this workshop, they asked for access to the official exchange rate, doubt that happens. If they get it at the parallel market rate, then you're going to see the cost of fuel probably match or exceed where diesel is, which is about 800 naira per liter. So this push-pull dynamic continues to happen with the marketers asking for funds. Finally, Central Bank of Nigeria at their retreats in Abuja disclosed that about 9.7 trillion naira has been disbursed to a number of sectors: manufacturing, energy, infrastructure, agriculture. But what was also notable, Deputy Governor Aisha Ahmad stated that the beneficiaries of these loans need to pay them back, which is pretty straightforward. I mean, if you've benefited from getting these loans, they are not grants, they are loans, you have to pay them back to be able to get this, like the cycle continue, which I think makes a whole lot of sense. But also at that retreat, they also mentioned that part of their disbursements have also aided food security as well. So, Ayo, that's what we're seeing coming from here.
Yeah, let me speak to the lithium. So, yes, you're right. There's lithium in Kogi.
Kogi, yeah? Okay, all right.
Cross River and in Ekiti.
Thank you.
And in August of this year, the Minister of Mines and Steel Development, Mr. Olamileko Adegbite, had given a reason why they blocked Tesla from coming to mine, that they wanted to stop foreign organizations from coming to mine without local value. So rather than taking our lithium, mining it and taking it abroad and then processing, is come and build your factories here, come and build industry here.
Right.
And of course, the benefit to the locals in Nigeria. Absolutely important. I agree with him, and I believe that these are the kinds of conversations that we want to start having. And that's
so he should be there. He should be in DC,
he
he should be talking to Tesla right now, right?
I was going to mention that. So absolutely. So we have, beyond presidents and leaders of nations in Africa, we also have chief executives of the private sector there. Yesterday, Mr. Tony Elumelu hosted such a dinner, at the US-Africa Leaders Summit.
Yeah.
And these, like you mentioned, are important conversations. We don't want, as the president as Joe Biden has said, we don't want to be a recipient continent any longer. We want to be in partnership with the US, in partnership with organizations, and attract foreign aid. But in order to do that, we also must speak about enabling business environment for investors to come in. So if you're going in there to attract foreign investments, you must ensure that your country is not, putting up policies that puts businesses at a disadvantage.
Right.
So what are we going there with, and what are we coming back with? So absolutely important.
Yeah.
For the $55 billion, they haven't highlighted what the specific areas they would go into. Biden has said that in the next 3 days they would break it down through dinners. But very importantly, I must mention before I pass on, is that they've also talked about the fact that this summit is Africa-driven.
Yeah.
So they're going to, the agenda, the theme is going to be Agenda 2063 that's been developed by the African Union. I love that.
Yeah.
We are going in, we should be going to the US with a plan. We are going there not with our cap in hand, going to beg. We're going there as equal partners, as it were. I hope we've reached that status.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see, as you mentioned, the outcome from this summit.
So just to piggyback on that, the problem is you can't give what you don't have.
Okay.
You don't have anything currently to give. That's why it's always difficult. You know why China will sign deals with Saudi Arabia? Because China has the skill development in their country, and they have companies that can produce those things Saudi Arabia needs. But look at how many do we have here?
Fair point.
We can't even make our own roads. We import the Chinese to come and help us make roads. We import the Chinese to come and help us make rail. So
did you see that tweet? Our friend that's always tagging us.
Yeah, so except you
Yeah.
invest in skill. And that's why what we should do in the next couple of years is to invest in skill. And government should be able to help support Nigerian-owned companies to be able to get this skill. Then it is those companies you will take and go. For the MOMAN marketers, I'm scared because, we've done it before. The only difference was the model. The model was before that everybody will import and they will go claim their subsidies.
Yeah.
Based on what they report. You know how they violated that. People that were bringing ships in with empty stuff, they said they brought in oil. And I also fear if that happens, it's going to be an oligalistic competition where there are going to be, few key players in the system, and they're going to be able to manipulate the price and shut down people.
But you don't want the status quo, do you?
So what we should be doing is have a long-term plan to be able to get refineries in place so that the factors of production locally can support this. I mean, there are African countries that's got refineries working.
Gotcha.
So if the turnaround maintenance comes in on our refineries, Dangote comes in, we have multiple refineries, then we can get a lot of things in place. That's the long-term solution. This importation will not help us.
This is the second time this morning we're talking about the US-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. It will start this morning. Nkechi Nana reported from Washington, D.C., but it's important to note that it starts today. 49 African leaders, heads of state, have been invited. 5 were excluded. Those 5 that were excluded were leaders of Eritrea, Somaliland, Guinea-Conakry, Mali, countries where there have been issues with regard to military intervention. And so this is a multi-themed summit about democracy, about governance, about climate adaptation, about the U.S. promoting its own strategic interests in Africa. And it is instructive because this is the second similar summit. The last time it was held was in 2014 under President Barack Obama. Under President Trump, there was some kind of withdrawal, strategic, if you may say, from Africa. But President Biden has rediscovered Africa. And I think from the point of view of foreign policy process and emphasis, I think is important. Now, that's one point. The second point is that, yes, Nigeria is one of those countries that have been invited. And President Buhari is going to speak today on climate adaptation, on just energy transition, which is an echo of the major outcome of the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt,
Yep.
where the world, the rest of the world, the developing world was asking for climate justice. So President Buhari has a good topic, and also it is important that Nigeria is speaking on day one, some kind of recognition of our importance. Number three, all of these issues have to be made. I asked Nkechi Nana the point about, oh, this looks like another scramble for Africa. Well, it looks like it because Africa is the last frontier. Japan is interested, France is interested, China is all over the place. So the United States is trying to also gain space and traction and protect its own interests. Some of the issues that will come up will be the current global issues. Okay, why the Americans protect their own interests? Jake Sullivan announced $55 billion
Yes, indeed.
aid for African countries. But there are Africans who say, well, what we're looking for is not aid. What we're looking for is partnership. But the opportunities are there. Project Africa, Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, AGOA. Do these African countries go to these conferences, summits, to protect their own interests? That is a big elephant in the room. Do we have the capacity for follow-up? Do we even understand why we are there, other than the jamboree, the opportunity to travel that we take?
Yep.
Can Africa also invite America, France, Japan, China to come here and say we want to have a dialogue with you? After all, international companies, countries are supposed to be equal under international law. So there's the geopolitical side of it and what we do with it hereafter. Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Rotus.
Doctor.
Thank
I
you.
want to clap to
Yes,
that.
yes, we applaud that.
Absolutely.
Yes, Africa
Equal
first.
partners. We're looking forward to a U.S. Africa Summit held in Nigeria. Thank you, Rotus,
Thank you so
for your
much.
time.
Thank
See
you
you
so much.
tomorrow.